Merry meet! I'm Aislin and this is Ask Aislin. Tonight we're talking about the full moon and intuition. It's the perfect time to be talking about this as the full moon is tomorrow night. So our moon this month is in Aquarius. It will occur at 6:36 p.m. Pacific time, 9:36 p.m. Eastern time. And it is the last supermoon of 2022. So as a supermoon, it's closer to the Earth than usual. It will appear bigger and brighter in the sky. Sometimes people think that makes the energy feel a little bit more magical. So even though the moon is tomorrow night at its peak of fullness at that 6:36, 9:36 time, still going to see it tonight when it rises. It's going to be quite big. And actually a couple of days afterwards as well. So I definitely encourage you to get outside and see it at some point. This is going to be a very beautiful moon. As far as the sign of Aquarius, each moon, because it's in a different sign, has different energies that are going to be resonating with it. And in the sign of Aquarius, Aquarius is the sign of the free thinker, the thinking outside of the box, kind of the non-conformist energy. This moon is going to inspire us to really step out into our big selves, to not be afraid of expressing the qualities inherent in us that we might be afraid of other people seeing, or might be afraid of what they think. So this moon really encourages you to get out there and just show your individuality and your uniqueness. Now, you can think, one question to think about is, in what ways could you make your true self shine brighter? Just something to consider for this moon. Now, all full moons are connected to the new moons that took place 6 months before them. This moon will be connected to the Aquarius new moon that took place on January 31st. So one thing that's always useful every new moon is every full moon is to think back to the prior new moon. Think about what was going on in your life around January 31st. And then fast forward to now and look for some of those things, perhaps some resolution around some of those things, or perhaps even manifestation of things that were started around January 31st. Now, full moons in general, we have a lot of heightened energy. It's really good for manifestation, for magic, especially of drawing in things. And many people will experience very vivid dreams or more dreams. I've been noticing the past few nights. I'm remembering my dreams more. And a lot of people also have difficulty sleeping. So some will find that they're wide awake at 3 a.m. I had a lot of trouble sleeping last night myself. And another thing that we experience is heightened intuition. And that's what the topic of tonight's episode is about. But before I get into that, I just wanted to mention that as far as the intuitive powers of the moon, you can have your intuition can be heightened at any time, but we find that at the full moon it really kind of gets heightened. I don't even want to say peak, because even though the full moon is a peak, I feel like the intuitive energy of the moon actually peaks a little bit later than the full moon. So as we move into the waning cycle, you may feel that your intuition continues to stay heightened and even may get a little bit more. And if you think about the wheel of the year, we often notice that at Samhain the veils start to thin. So a similar thing happens to us every cycle in the waning period. And this has to do a lot with why our intuitive powers might feel more heightened at this time. So it's not quite the same as the thinning of the veils at Samhain. It's a little bit less pronounced, but nevertheless it's there. So it's important for us to remember that and consider that. So if you want to work with your intuition, now is the perfect time. So I'm going to dive in and talk about intuition. And this is a topic that comes up a lot. A lot of people ask me about this. It comes up a lot in the Body Mind Witchcraft group. And people see, this is the challenge I hear from a lot of people. Either there's a lot of self-doubt, there is a lot of fear, there are some kind of blockages. So these are words that I see over and over and over. So if you're feeling any of these things, you are not alone. You're in the right place. Now, if you're someone who your intuition works really well for you, maybe what I'm going to say next, the rest of this, maybe it doesn't really apply to you, but I still I still suggest always listen, with curiosity. You never know, you might learn something. But if you are somebody who feels that you want to optimize your intuition, you know that you have these abilities, but they're just not quite working for you, this episode's all for you. So I will address all of these things in turn: the self-doubt, the fear, the blockages. I'm going to start by talking about where the intuition resides. So our intuition resides in the third eye, which is located here, not directly between the eyebrows. It's actually a little bit above in the center of the forehead. Sometimes people say that they feel their intuition is in the crown. I don't think that that's wrong, though in my experience, the crown is a little bit more associated with our expansion up into the universe, with our connection to deities and the divine. And more our own internal intuition tends to be a little bit lower here in the third eye. Now, many who are called to witchcraft have fairly strong third eyes and quite strong crown chakras. That doesn't mean that you can't have blockages here. So just because we have strength in these areas doesn't mean we can't have blockages. But we never really know. Spiritual people tend to have blockages in parts of their bodies, and everything underneath the third eye, especially, is a place for us to investigate. So if we feel, if you're someone who says, I think I have got a blockage of my third eye, or I think I've got a blockage of my intuition, it's really important for you to explore what's going on beneath it. So sometimes we think, if it's third eye, we better be up here working. But really, we should start by working lower first. Check to make sure everything down below is moving optimally. All of our energy is moving correctly. So if you think that your blockage might be there, we're going to look at the lower energy centers next. So I'm going to start by talking about the throat. We're going to move down through the third eye, down all the way down through the body. And as we go, you can kind of see if you think this part of the body might apply to you. And just know, all 5 of the parts I'm about to talk about, they may all apply to you, or maybe just 1 or 2. So just see what happens as we go. So our throat chakra is called Vishuddha in Sanskrit, and it is connected to the ether element, it's translated as Akasha. In a witchcraft setting, we are more likely to call this the element of spirit, the 5th element, which is the one that gives birth to all of the other ones. Now, the third eye itself isn't really connected to an element, but everything below it is. So you can choose to work with the energy centers, you can work with the elements, or you can work with both. To me, that's usually the best thing, is when we combine all of it together. Now, the blockages in the throat chakra, they make it hard for us to hear with the spiritual ears. They also make it hard for us to decipher the communication that the universe is bringing to us. And so if you feel that there's a blockage in the third eye, or a blockage in your intuition, I should say, I would start by kind of really exploring this area first. Now, here are some signs that this part of your energetic system might be blocked. So it could be that you have difficulty speaking your truth. That would be a sign that the throat chakra needs some work. You could have neck pain. These can show up as physical things, or they can show up as more emotional or spiritual things as well. So we could have neck pain, we might have ear pain, we might have jaw pain, TMJ, thyroid issues. So any of these would be a sign that this is an area that you're going to want to explore more deeply. So what happens if you find that you think the throat chakra needs some work? Well, there's a lot of remedies. So there are different things we can do for each of the energy centers. Now, I'm just going to preface this with that we will need like a whole episode just to talk about each of the energy centers, and I am planning that. So a whole episode for each one. So I'm going to go briefly through them just in the interest of time, but just kind of make a note. If you think this is the one that you want to explore more, there will be an episode for this later. So ways that we can remedy a blockage in the throat chakra is sound. Sound is usually going to be the best thing we can do here, especially sound that we make. So chanting, singing, is really great for working on, burning away the blockages here. And there's a breath that's called Bee's Breath. This is one of the best ones. On my YouTube, Body, Mind, Witchcraft, you can find 5 minute, I think I do it for 3 to 5 minutes. It's really simple. You just will plug your ears and then you just make a humming sound. Close the mouth and just make a humming sound out as you breathe. So it looks something like and then you would just do that over and over and over. And it is great breath because you'll hear it kind of reverberating in the throat, in the skull as well. And it's also a good breath for anxiety. So if you have any anxiety, that's also a perk that comes with working on that. But that is a great practice for working with the throat chakra. Now moving on, we come to the heart chakra, Anahata. So this sits at the center of the chest. If we have blockages here, we're going to have trouble moving up into the upper energy centers. Remember, that's where the third eye is. So this area is the bridge between the lower energy centers and the upper energy centers. And a lot of us get blocked here. And this can go way back into childhood. So one remedy of working with the heart chakra is inner child work. But these emotional blockages here, they just create so many problems for us. Now, signs that this area might be blocked or might have some kind of issues in it is shoulder pain, chest pain, breathing issues. The lungs are tied to the heart chakra. Difficulty opening up to others, really feeling that it's hard to become more intimate or share intimate things with people. So what can we do if we feel that the heart needs some work? Well, therapy is always a good one for working through blockages. So if you feel like you have some blockages in the heart, I would definitely look into getting a therapist if you don't already have one, or at least somebody who practices therapeutic, emotional therapeutic work. Shadow work is great. I'm going to get in at the end. I'm going to talk about my shadow work membership that's coming soon. But shadow work is a great way to work with the heart chakra, and also restorative heart openers. So this is where you really take some time to relax. And what you ideally want to do is get the heart lifted, so you would be laying down on the ground, and then perhaps you put a pillow below the heart so that the heart is elevated. Usually the arms are spread open. It can be quite a vulnerable position to be in, but if you can push through that, it can do wonders for opening up any blockages that we have in the heart. Moving from that, we come to the solar plexus. Now, there are a lot of people who have told me it's their doubt in themselves, their self-doubt, that really seems to be getting in the way of their intuition. So if you're one of those people who feels that, then this is all for you, the solar plexus. Now, the solar plexus is called Manipura. It is attached to the fire element. This is our internal fire. And this is a really big one to talk about. The collective teaches us to have doubt. We live in a society that doesn't really believe in magic, doesn't really believe in intuition or the things we do. It's a really science-based world, and it's strange because it's a world that hasn't figured out that science and magic actually go together, and that it's just sometimes these intuitive arts that we practice, they're ahead of science. The science is behind and hasn't kind of caught up yet. But there's a lot of advances in quantum physics that are every day proving these intuitive things that you and I all know already. But nevertheless, we live in this society where the collective has all this self-doubt. We can't help that because we live here. There's nowhere else for us to go. And even if you were to detach yourself from society and go live, among the wild, you still are attached to the collective. You are born here in this time, and there's nothing you can do about that. But what we can do about it is we can combat it with some practices. So signs that we might have some issues in the solar plexus are the self-doubt that we talked about, digestive problems, issues like back pain, especially middle back pain, feeling unmotivated, feeling like you can't get started, because remember, this is the internal fire. And like I said, that's self-doubt. So what are some things we can do? Well, we can take a probiotic. Probiotics are always good for, making sure that the solar plexus is strong. We can try to eat within the seasons. So if you study any Ayurveda, it teaches greatly about eating within the seasons. Now, you don't have to get all into that in order to work with the solar plexus, but just thinking about eating foods that are in season, the things that are on sale in the produce section usually are the things that are in season. Trying to eat more locally, that can help. The breath of fire is a really good breath. It is, I've taught it a couple of times. There's a video on my YouTube, I believe, where I go into it. If it's not there, I'll put one up. But it's just a quick pumping of the belly. I don't really have time to get into that today. But like I said, there will be a full episode on the solar plexus eventually, and I'll teach that breath for sure. And a self-belief practice is really good. And I'm going to teach that actually right now because it's really quick. And I think it is one of the best, quickest ways that you can break through blockages in the solar plexus and blockages of self-belief or blockages like self-doubt that's in your way. So it's very simple, and you use tapping. And basically you start at the top of the head, and you can close your eyes if you want, and you just tap here a couple of times. And you just say to yourself, either inside your head or out loud, I call in the energy of self-belief. And I usually like to do this 3 times on each of the energy centers. So I call in the energy of self-belief, calling in the energy of self-belief, the energy of self-belief. And then you'll move down to the third eye, calling in the energy of self-belief, calling in the energy of self-belief, calling in the energy of self-belief. And then moving down to the throat, calling in the energy of self-belief, calling in the energy of self-belief, calling in the energy of self-belief. And then down to the heart, calling in the energy of self-belief, calling in the energy of self-belief, calling in the energy of self-belief. And then down to the solar plexus is about 2 or 3 inches, about 2 inches above the navel, calling in the energy of self-belief, calling in the energy of self-belief, calling in the energy of self-belief. And then you move down to the sacral chakra, so this is about 2 inches below the navel, calling in the energy of self-belief, calling in the energy of self-belief, calling in the energy of self-belief. And finally, when you get to the root, you got 2 options here. So you can reach around, you can tap on the base of the spine, the tip of the tailbone if you want to, or you can just draw the energy down into the just kind of energetically imagine drawing that energy down into the base of the spine, and then you say 3 times, calling in the energy of self-belief. And after that, if you want, you can take a big deep breath. You don't really have to do anything else. I know that it seems so simple, but if you try it, it works. I do this every time before I get on a live, or every time before I lead a ritual, for either a solitary ritual for myself or one where I'm leading other people. I always do this practice. And so I just say, you don't necessarily have to believe it's going to work, even though it is, but at least suspend your disbelief and just try it and see what happens, because it is a really powerful and simple thing to do that can start to burn away that self-doubt. Okay, so moving on to the sacral chakra. The sacral chakra is called Svadhisthana. It is connected to the water element. Now, this is all about how we flow. So do we go against the flow, or do we flow with the flow, go with the flow? So in order for our intuition to be strong, we need to be in a good flow state, which means we don't want a lot of restrictions and blockages here. So you want to think to yourself, what habits or things that I do are going against the flow? And those are the things that we want to try to eliminate. So signs that we might have issues here in the sacral chakra are sexual problems that's connected to the sacral chakra. Intimacy issues can also be here. They're also in the heart, but in the sacral chakra as well. Hip tightness and pain. We might have low back pain. Any issues of the reproductive system or the hormones. Hormones are really like the whole entire body. In a lot of ways, they are controlled from the upper centers, but they do happen down here in the sacral chakra. So any of these things will be indications that maybe we have some issues with sacral chakra and some blockages here that we could get rid of, and then that can help open up these higher energy centers, right? Get them moving more optimally. So what are some remedies for the sacral chakra? Well, get off your schedule would be one thing. I know that it's not possible to be off the schedule all the time, though I sure wish you could be, but get off the schedule every once in a while. Just try to have a day where there is no schedule, or go somewhere and don't schedule anything. And just go with the flow. Be spontaneous. So just a brief story. There was a time that I was in Sedona, and I really honestly wasn't doing anything. I wasn't trying to be in a flow state, but I think there was just something about the energy there, the vortexes, and I woke up this one day, and I'm usually a person who has a lot of plans. I'm a big planner, but I left myself space and room to have no plans, and I just went. I just kind of started, like, where would my feet lead me? And I went from place to place to place, and every place I went, I felt that I could see these signs of what to do there, whether it was what to eat, what to buy, what to view. And I was truly in this flow state for several hours. It was such a magical experience. And it's hard to replicate it, because sometimes it's hard to say I'm going to be in the flow state. You just have to kind of let it unfold. But if you notice that you're in it, just let it go. And one way that you can try to kind of trigger that state is to get off your schedule. So other things that can help with movement in the solar plexus is any types of flowing movements. So for example, dance, or I like to do hip circles, things like that. Anything that's gonna move in a flowing state. Swimming is awesome for the solar plexus. Sacral chakra. Going to the ocean, things like that. Okay, and then finally that brings us to the root. Now the root is one of the most important. They're all very important, but the root is really important here. It's called Muladhara. It's connected to the earth element. This is about our ability to be grounded versus ungrounded. So a lot of spiritual people don't realize how truly ungrounded they are. We're up here in the upper energy centers, and we don't pay a lot of attention to the root or to our groundedness. And it's really important that we root down before we rise up. So like the tree that roots down, it grounds its roots first before it lifts its branches up to the sky. That's the same thing that happens for us. So if we want to really work with the third eye and our intuition, we want to make sure that we're as grounded as possible. There is also a connection between the root and the third eye. There are two energy centers, energy channels. There are many energy channels through the body. In fact, there are 72,000. But there are two in particular, the Ida and the Pingala. They start at the root, and they interweave around the central channel, the Sushumna, and they don't touch again until they get to the third eye. So this is a sign to us of how intimately connected the third eye and the root truly are. So signs that we might have some issues with the root would be feeling ungrounded. That would be one. But not feeling safe or secure, that's definitely a sign. Having some monetary issues. The root is also connected to the feet, the knees, the legs. So any pain or issues with them would be a sign that the root is a place we want to work with. So what can we do here? Well, we can do grounding meditations. The grounding tree meditation is always great, where you kind of envision roots coming out from your body, going down into the earth, and you can actually begin to breathe the energy of the earth up into your root chakra, and then breathe it back down into the earth. That's a beautiful way to work with the root. We can always bring the third eye to the floor, so child pose is awesome for the root, so bringing the third eye down to the floor. So again, like I said, I will be doing a whole episode on each of the chakras in turn and practices that you can do. But today I just really wanted to bring this all to your attention so that we start thinking about, what could be going on that could be getting in the way of our intuition in our third eye. So most of us have blockages in more than one of these centers. And what I recommend is some kind of daily energy practice. Now, I've found that working with the chakras is a really effective way. This is what I did to really optimize my own intuition. But there are other energy practices that you can use. But I would recommend you select something and work on moving energy through your body every single day, if not every other day. But most of the time, we want some kind of, even if it's just as simple as 5 minutes, we want to be spending some time every day moving energy. And you can do this through different breath work. You can do this through yoga. And I should mention that this is not like the power yoga that everybody in the West loves so much. We really want yoga that's specific for the energy centers. Mantras, just getting practice moving energy up and down through kind of meditation practices. I am going to, at the very end, I'm going to teach you a breath called the 4-stroke breath. It's a really good breath for the third eye, for strengthening the third eye in particular. So I am going to teach that at the end. And if we do some of these things every day, we're more likely that we're going to eliminate some of these blockages. So now, we talked a little bit about the idea of self-doubt. It is active in most of us, even if we don't think it's there, it is usually there, unconscious oftentimes. And, one of the things that can really help, especially if you are someone who says, I feel like I have these blockages, in my intuition, I feel like I doubt myself. So listen carefully, because this one's for you, is we need to make a deal with ourselves that we are going to go all in. So I had this intuitive reader reading for me a while back, and she said, it's like you've got 1 foot in and you got 1 foot out, and you got to get them both in one place. So you can make a decision. You can step out and just go on your life like the rest of the muggles. Don't believe in yourself. Forget about the intuition. That's an option. It's an option for any of us. Or you can put both feet in, and once you put both feet in, then you got to make the deal with yourself. You're going to go all in. Stop straddling that line was basically the message. And that's my message for you too. If you're straddling that line, stop. See, can you make a deal with yourself that for the next moon cycle, you're going to trust yourself? Could you do that? That would be my challenge to you. And if a moon cycle sounds like too long, then try a week or even just 3 days and see what happens. Make that deal with yourself, and then consider this. Act in alignment with the person that you want to be, not the person that you are. So that person who's doubting and all that, that's not you. That's not in alignment with what you want. So make the deal. I'm going to act in alignment with the person I want to be, the person I'm becoming. And, think about this. How would I act if I truly was someone who believed in my intuition? How would I act? What would I do? How would I be? Where would I go? What would I eat? Think about all of this and make that deal with yourself. And I know it sounds so simple and so easy to say, and it's so hard to do. But if you want to get unstuck, you got to get something that's going to unstuck you, right? And for me, this was a game changer when I made this deal with myself. So, another thing that I also think is important is to try to figure out where in your body you yourself feel your intuition, if anywhere. Now, I've talked about this in another episode. There's an episode several weeks back that was also about the third eye and intuition. And if you want, you can go back and watch that. But I talked a little bit about how not everyone feels their intuition in the same place. So one thing that can get in, we can have trouble with is that there are people who will say, everybody feels, you got to trust your gut. You got to listen to your gut. Everybody feels in your gut. And while it's true that many people do feel it there, not everybody does. So you got to be careful of teachers who teach you that there's one true way of doing something, because I'm just going to tell you it's bullshit. That it's not, and it can really do a lot of damage to people as they're learning. So like if something doesn't resonate with you, don't take that as gospel. go and see if you can find an alternative, right? So for me, thinking about that intuition being my gut was the most damaging thing. It hindered my intuition for a long time, because here's the problem. I feel anxiety in my gut. So when my stomach started to, I started to feel something in my stomach, in my gut, that was my anxiety, not my intuition. And it took me some time to figure this out. But once I realized that my intuition isn't there, it was a game changer for me. So you got to try to figure out where in your own body it is. It might be the gut, but it might be another part of your body. The maiden in our coven, she was just telling me the other night at our Lunaza ritual that she feels it in her, like in her inner arms right here. So they kind of tingle or itch even, and she knows that that's her intuition. So we've all got to figure that out for ourselves. So that's a little tidbit I wanted to give you. And then I wanted to, I said I promised that I was going to talk about, or I was going to teach you that that breath at the end, and I still am. But I did want to share with you my third eye opening story, because it was really, I didn't intend for this to happen, and maybe there will be a little tidbit in here that will inspire you. But it was not many years ago, it was about 4 years ago, when I was in my first yoga teacher training. This was an in-person training. We went for like 10 hours a day for about 16 or 17 days. And about halfway through, or maybe 2/3 of the way through, one night before we're going home, the lead teacher said, tomorrow we're going to do this exercise. It's a silence exercise. So she said, when you wake up in the morning, you are not going to communicate with anyone, and that includes nonverbal. It includes like eye movement, or eye exchange with people, gazing at other people. And you're going to wake up. There's no technology, so you can't put anything in your GPS. So the night before, you better like figure out how you're getting back to the center where the training's going to be. And so that day, so you woke up, and once the alarm went off, that was the end of communication. So we got to the center where we were doing all of this, and we did yoga in silence. Now she did speak because someone had to instruct, but none of us could. And then there were these different breaks throughout the day, and normally you would talk to people, obviously. But what she said is that you can't even make eye contact. And so it's kind of strange, because it was almost like being dead in a sense. And I think that was the point of it. And I will be honest with you, there were a few people who, they lost it. They actually had to leave because it was such an intense experience. But most of us stuck through it, and at one point, we had lunch. I went off somewhere, and I was eating lunch, and it was insane how intensified all my senses were, my taste, my hearing, everything. And then we came back, and by now this is like hours and hours and hours of like no communication with anyone. And then it was kind of time, it's going to be about time to break the silence. And they started to do what they call an Om bath. So she had like a sound bath going, but then they were saying Om over and over again. And they told us to grab a partner. And I'm so glad that the person I was actually with, she grabbed somebody else. And so I had to grab a girl I didn't know. And I'm so glad, because I don't know that this would have worked if it had been someone I knew. And so we were told to sit there and hold each other's hands and just stare into each other's eyes. Now, I've done an eye gazing exercise before with a girl from my coven, and it was really a nice experience, but nothing like what happened to me here. And so I don't know if it was the fact that it was this girl I didn't know, it was this whole day of not speaking or communicating and kind of being like we're dead, but we're holding hands and gazing into our eyes, and the teacher is kind of, the sound bath is going on, and every once in a while she'll say something, and she said, pull back the veils. And it was like, I don't know, the veils pulled back. I get chills just thinking about the experience, because it was so moving. And so I was staring into this girl's eyes, and all of a sudden her face began to shift. And, if I had known better, I'd think I was on drugs or something, but I wasn't. I was just, veils pulled back. and her face was shifting, and she was an old woman and a baby, and I saw all these faces within her, and it was like the book Siddhartha, if anyone's read it, at the very end, there's a scene where Govinda sees this in Siddhartha's face. You can see all the shifting patterns, and it was what I realized while I was staring at the girl is I was seeing like all the lives that she had ever been and all the lives that she would ever become, and they were all one. And it was like the universe was gifting me this in this moment, and I started to cry, and the girl was crying, and I was pretty sure that everybody else was having the same experience. In fact, I thought, I guess that's the point of it, huh? So, you know, at the end, I told her, you know, so finally we broke the silence, right? And I told her that this had happened, and, you know, she said it was just so lovely to like stare at me and be connected with a person, but she did not have the profound experience that I did. And when I shared this later with the group, nobody else did either. I was the only one who had had it. So I felt so thankful and so blessed that the universe had given me this moment and that my third eye had opened. And, you know, it's not one of those things that we can chase. Like, that's one of the things I realized. We can't chase this experience. It's like the universe will give this to us, but when we truly become aligned, you know, we really can pull back the veils and, you know, open up the third eye. And once we've done it once, it means we can do it again. So I just really wanted to share that with you. All right, so before we end here, I wanted to teach you 2 little techniques for your third eye to strengthen your third eye, and then we'll be out of here. So the first one is a mudra. It's called the Hakini mudra. Mudras are gestures made with the body, usually with the hands, and what they do is they basically draw in a certain energy into the body. So they're very wonderful because they're so simple. We can do them and then we'll immediately bring that energy into the body. So this is one to strengthen your intuition. So Hakini mudra, you're just going to connect all your fingers like this, and that's all you have to do. Okay, so this is really nice if you want to do this during meditation. Sometimes I like to even bring the thumbs to the third eye like that. Or you could hold this down kind of at the middle pillar like that if you want. You can do, sometimes I like to, if I was doing like yoga for intuition, so maybe you're doing like a sun salutation or moon salutation, and then at the end, instead of coming the hands back to prayer, bring them into the Hakini mudra. So this is a really, really nice gesture you can do, you know, if you're out somewhere or you're, you know, you want to kind of open up your third eye, open up your intuition, go ahead and try that. And the second thing I'm going to teach you is called the 4-stroke breath. It's a really great breath. So like I was telling you before, there's like all this breath work we can do for the lower chakras. This one's actually for your intuition, for your third eye. So it's really simple to do. And you want to start by being in a comfortable seated position. I probably wouldn't do it laying down or standing. I would get really comfortable and seated. Then when you're ready to do it, you're going to close your eyes to 1/10 is what they always prescribe. It's really like squinting. So like that. So when we're about ready to do it, we're going to do that. I'm just prefacing. You're going to close your eyes to 1/10. And then what we're going to do is we're going to bring our hands into a different mudra. So this is like the fire mudra. So what you do is you interlace the fingers. And for those of you who came to the Lionsgate portal ritual on Monday, we did this at one point during the ritual. So we're going to interlace the fingers. You're going to bring the palms to touch. And then the thumbs are going to be up here straight. So this is what we actually did in the ritual. But in this, what we're going to do is we're going to cross the thumbs, and you're going to take the pointer fingers and you're going to bring them straight up like this. Okay, so it's going to look like that, right? Thumbs are crossed. So I'll just show it one more time. So we interlace the fingers. Okay, we're going to bring the palms to touch. Then you're going to cross the thumbs. It really doesn't matter which one on top of which. Just do what feels natural to you. And then you're going to stick the pointer fingers straight up. Right, so here we go. Then what you're going to do is you're going to bring this to your tip of your nose. And so, you know, it doesn't really matter how low or how high you do it. Everybody could be different here. But what you want is that when you close your eyes to that 1/10 position, that if you stare down like at the tip of your nose, you want to be able to see the tip of that finger. Okay, so that's what you do. Okay, so that's our hand position. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take 4 breaths in. So they call this 4 strokes in and 1 stroke out. So it's going to be through an O-shaped mouth. And then when we want to do the exhale, we're going to close the mouth and we're going to do it through our nose. We're going to exhale through the nose. So it's going to look like this. And I actually take that back. I'm gonna back up for 1 second. I would actually keep the mouth open in the O shape for the whole thing. It's a little bit challenging to close the mouth in the middle and exhale through the nose. I don't really like that feeling, so we're gonna change it up. There are 2 different ways you can do it. This is a little bit easier way. So it's gonna be okay, and each of those strokes is about a second, so that whole breath is approximately 5 seconds long. Now, some people say you should do this for about 16 minutes. I think that's an insane amount of time for most of us, especially when we're starting out. So what I would say is 1 minute when you begin, work up to 3 minutes if you want. And remember how I talked about having some kind of energetic practice daily or almost daily? This could be it. You could just do this breath for a couple of minutes, okay? So we're gonna do just a couple of rounds of it. So putting it all together now. Hands are fingers interlaced, palms together. Okay, the thumbs cross, and then it's the pointer fingers that come up. We call this the Jupiter finger. It's also the finger that's attributed to the element of air. Okay, so we bring it to the tip of the nose, then you're gonna close your eyes to 1/10. To me, that's just like a little bit of a squint, okay? And then here we go. So you're gonna just take a breath in and a breath out. It's always good to just take a few breaths like this to kind of reset yourself. And here we go. Okay, so I did that a couple times. What I would suggest you do it about a minute or so to start, and then you could just go into some nice in and out breathing, slow breathing. But try that out and see what happens. It's a really good practice for strengthening this third eye. So make that deal with yourself. You're going all in. You're putting both feet in. Maybe it's a week. Maybe it's the full moon cycle. You're going to see what happens. Try something energetic every day or every other day, or at least most of the days if you can, and you could use that breath if you want, and let's see what happens. So before I end, I promised that I was going to talk just a touch about shadow work. I wanted to spiral back to this, and many of you have heard this, but I have a new membership that's starting, and the first 3 to 4 months of it is going to be some really nice deep shadow work. So we will be working in a smaller group setting. So, the group here in Body, Mind, Witchcraft is close to 900 people now. This is going to be a much smaller setting. If you decide to join the membership, you can get an accountability partner if you want. You don't have to take one, but if you want somebody to kind of be paired up with, you can. And we are going to do, through a series of rituals and workshops and exercises, we're just going to get deep down into that shadow and start doing some true transformative work. So we'll be working with Kali, the goddess. She's going to help us tear down our fears. We're going to work with Ariadne, unraveling the untruths that we tell ourselves about ourselves. We're going to be working with Anana. We're going to do a guided descent into the underworld right around Samhain. We are going to work with Chiron, the wounded healer. We're going to do some looking at our astrological charts to figure out where our wound is and how we can heal that so that we become more effective healers ourselves. So it's just such a great, it's going to be such a great experience. I'm just so excited and thrilled to be able to finally bring this and unveil this for everybody. I've been working on it for a while. So if I've been mentioning it places, and I know there are some people who are already on the list to be the first to hear about it when the doors open. So if you've already told me that you're interested, don't worry, I've got you on the list. I'm very good with details, so I got you on the list. But if you're worried, you can always let me know again. But if you haven't told me yet that you're interested, definitely get in, tell me about it so that you get to be one of the first that hears about it when the doors finally open. Because what's going to happen is like I said, I'm keeping it kind of smaller. And so once I fill those spots, it's going to close. And we will open it again later for more to join in, but you really want to get in here in the beginning. And so let me know. And what I said before, we'll be working on the shadow work for about 3 to 4 months. But shadow work is it's not something that we can do like long term. So at some point we'll take a break from it. We'll work with something else, perhaps dreams, perhaps the chakras. We'll do energetic work. There's so much that we can do. So we'll kind of do some of that, and then we can always come back and we'll do more shadow work. But once you're in the group too, the membership, you'll help guide us, and you'll give your input on what you want to work on next. And so it's going to be a great community, and I'm just really excited to bring it to you. So let me know if you're interested, and I will be I'll basically be coming to you guys in the next couple of weeks to tell you all the details, and then you can make a decision if you want to join up. Okay. All right, so let me just make sure that there were no questions here that are left. Okay. And I will see you next time. Happy full moon, everybody. I hope you get out there and you see that beautiful super moon and you do something nice tomorrow to celebrate. All right, until next time, blessed be.